It started like any other Friday night. A little music, a few friends, some burgers on the grill, nothing anyone could complain about. Or so I thought. Our garage had always been the unofficial neighborhood hangout, a place where laughter bounced off the concrete walls and neighbors occasionally waved as they passed. But apparently, in the meticulously trimmed world of our HOA, the word party was a crime worse than jaywalking with a jet ski. I was halfway through flipping a burger when my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Beckman. It simply said, "Karen has called the cops." My stomach sank. Karen, the HOA's self-appointed sheriff of civility, had a reputation. She once reported a man for watering his lawn too aggressively. She didn't just knock on doors. She filed forms, summoned letters, and somehow convinced entire committees to investigate you for crimes you didn't even know existed. Before I could even reply, the doorbell rang. My friends, oblivious to the brewing storm, were still blasting music. I peeked through the peephole, half expecting a single patrol car. Instead, nothing. Just silence. For a terrifying moment, I thought maybe Karen had chickened out. Then came the sirens. At first, it was one, a lonely wail in the distance. Then another, and another. Within 10 minutes, the subtle buzz of my suburban street had transformed into a full-blown emergency scene. Lights flashing reds and blues. Tires squealed. And there, at the end of my driveway, like an army summoned by some cosmic joke, pulled not one, not two, but nearly a dozen squad cars. The entire precinct, every officer from the tiny suburban station, was parked outside my garage party. Hey! I called to the nearest officer, holding up my spatula like a peace offering. "It's just burgers and beer." The officer tilted his hat, squinting at me through the flashing lights. "We got a call. Something about a disturbance." I swallowed. Disturbance? It's just fun, music, friends, snacks. He didn't answer. Instead, his partner started setting up traffic cones. My friends froze, beers halfway to their mouths, staring at the surreal scene unfolding before them. The line between comedy and disaster had officially blurred, and somehow I had front row seats. The first officer approached, his boots crunching against the gravel, and I could see the faint glint of disbelief in his eyes. "Is this a party?" he asked, probably expecting something darker, a brawl, a robbery, a marching band gone rogue. I swallowed, wiped my hands on my apron, and tried to explain, "Yeah, just a garage party. Music, food, friends, nothing serious." The officer's partner, a younger guy with a barely there mustache, shook his head and muttered under his breath, "Only in this neighborhood." By now, my friends were peeking out from behind the garage pillars, frozen like deer in headlights. My neighbor Tim, who had brought his homemade karaoke machine, whispered, "Dude, maybe we should have hidden the fog machine." I laughed nervously. "It's just fog from the grill, I swear." Meanwhile, Karen had appeared on her front porch, arms crossed like an eagle surveying its territory. She wore her trademark white pants and a blazer that screamed, "I mean business, and I have HOA-approved paperwork to prove it." "They told me there was a noise complaint," she called out, voice dripping with righteous indignation. I thought it was just your usual shenanigans, but apparently this is a full-blown illegal gathering. One of the officers, clearly trying not to laugh, muttered to his partner, "Illegal gathering in a garage." The other snickered quietly behind his clipboard. "Listen," I said, trying to stay calm. "We've got maybe 10 people here, and we've got food. That's it. It's literally a barbecue." Karen shook her head slowly, as if my words were the admission of a crime syndicate. "Barbecue or not, it's loud, it's disruptive, and it violates HOA Section 4B, Clause 17. You know very well that outdoor gatherings must be approved 2 weeks in advance." 2 officers looked at each other, clearly realizing that this was above their pay grade. One whispered, "Should we call the captain?" Before anyone could react, my neighbor Mrs. Beckman peeked around her corner, holding a smartphone like a weapon. "I filmed the entire thing," she said proudly. "It's going straight to the HOA board." At that moment, the absurdity hit me full force. Karen had called the cops for a small garage party, and somehow The entire precinct was here, lights flashing, officers cautiously positioning themselves around my driveway, all because I dared to play Uptown Funk on a Saturday night. The youngest officer, who clearly thought he was in the wrong movie, slowly approached me. "Sir, do you have ID?" "ID? What for fun?" I stammered, holding up my driver's license as if that could explain the situation. Meanwhile, my friends had started whispering strategies. What if we pretend the fog machine is a malfunctioning transformer? Tim suggested. I sighed. No. Just no. Karen, ever vigilant, had already begun pacing. "I will not stand by while you turn this neighborhood into a circus," she declared. She stumped down her steps, clutching her HOA binder like a shield. One officer finally broke the tension, trying to mediate. "It's just a party. Maybe we can resolve this without a full-on precinct response." Karen's glare could have melted metal. Resolve this by allowing these hooligans to disrespect community standards? Never. By now, my entire street had started to notice the spectacle. Kids from the cul-de-sac were peeking around corners. Drivers slowed down, some even honking, unsure if they were witnessing a police raid or a bizarre flash mob. I tried reasoning one last time. "Karen, I'll turn down the music. I'll move the party inside. We'll be quiet. Just, please, don't escalate this further." But Karen, standing like a general on parade, shook her head. No, this must be a lesson. It was at that precise moment that my neighbor Jeff, who had been quiet all along, pulled a cardboard box from his car. "Hey, guys, maybe they just like snacks," he said, opening the box to reveal an assortment of cupcakes. The precinct paused. Even the officers couldn't help but glance at the cupcakes, their expressions flickering between confusion and amusement. One officer whispered, Did someone bring peace offerings?" For a brief moment, time slowed. The absurdity of the situation, the HOA Karen, the entire police precinct, my bewildered friends, and a box of cupcakes, hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud. Almost. Karen, however, was unmoved. "I don't care about cupcakes. I care about the law." And yet, in that 10-minute window, the party had transformed from a casual neighborhood hangout into a surreal standoff that no one could have predicted. What had started as a simple Friday night barbecue was now a story that would echo through HOA legend for decades, or at least until someone uploaded a video online. I glanced around at my friends, at the officers cautiously maneuvering around the driveway, and at Karen, still fuming like a storm cloud over suburbia. The universe, it seemed, had decided to throw every ounce of absurdity it could muster into my little garage. And that's when it hit me. This was just the beginning. The tension was thick enough to cut with a spatula. I stood in the middle of my garage, staring at the flashing red and blue lights that painted my backyard like some dystopian rave, and I realized something terrifying. I had no idea how to de-escalate a situation where my garage was considered a felony hotspot. The officers fanned out, some leaning on their cars, others cautiously approaching the garage entrance, while Karen positioned herself in the perfect you-will-not-pass stance. The neighbors, half curious, half terrified, lined the sidewalks, whispering excitedly. It was like watching the world's smallest hostage situation, only the hostage was a pile of burgers, and the negotiators were here to enforce HOA rules instead of federal law. "So," said the young officer with a mustache, clearly still trying to wrap his head around this, "we need to make sure there's no, illegal activity." I blinked. Illegal activity? It's literally a garage. Music, snacks, some beer. I mean, if singing loudly counts, then maybe... Stop! Karen shrieked from the end of my driveway. This is not about beer or music. This is about respecting community standards. And this, she gestured dramatically toward my garage, is chaos. Tim, the karaoke guy, whispered behind me, "Dude, maybe we should hide the fog machine before someone calls SWAT." I groaned. "Tim, it's literally just smoke from the grill. And if SWAT shows up, I'm blaming you." The mustached officer sighed and pulled out his radio. Dispatch? We have a garage party situation. Repeat, garage party. No weapons, no violence, Just loud music and some minor public disturbance. From somewhere behind us, Jeff, ever the peacemaker, waved a cupcake in the air. Peace offering. The universe seemed to momentarily pause. One of the older officers glanced at the cupcakes and raised an eyebrow. Karen, however, was not amused. I don't care about your baked goods. This is about law and order. Meanwhile, my friend started to strategize. Okay, whispered Megan, the self-proclaimed party planner. If they are here, maybe we should, I don't know, negotiate. Negotiate what? I hissed. I didn't sign up for a garage summit. Before we could answer, one of the officers stepped forward with clipboard. Sir, I think we can resolve this peacefully of everyone. Karen interrupted with the subtlety of a marching band. We will not negotiate with lawbreakers. That's when it happened. The fog machine, or, as Tim insisted, a minor atmospheric enhancement device, kicked into overdrive, spilling thick white cloud across the driveway. The officers coughed, waving their hands. My friends were laughing hysterically. Karen gasped like she had just witnessed the apocalypse. Stop it, she yelled, flailing her HOA binder like a weapon. Do you know what this does to the property values? I think it makes the music sound cooler, Tim said cheerfully, completely unfazed by the surreal police presence. One officer tried to regain control. Everyone, please stand still. Just stay calm. But calm was officially gone. My neighbor, Mrs. Beckman, had decided to document every angle on her smartphone. This is going straight to the HOA, she shouted, clearly thrilled by the unfolding drama. Then, as if the universe wasn't already playing a cruel joke, my dog Max, sensing the heightened tension, decided it was a perfect moment to join the chaos. He bolted out from the garage, barking ferociously at the flashing lights. An officer jumped back, nearly tripping over a traffic cone. Karen screamed, "That dog is a menace!" I ran after Max, trying to regain control, but he had already circled 3 squad cars, yapping like a miniature thunderstorm. One of the officers muttered, "I didn't sign up for K9 backup," while the other just shook his head in disbelief. By now, the cupcakes had made their way onto the hood of one patrol car. Jeff had apparently decided this was a strategic display of good faith. The fog machine continued its relentless output, smoke curling around the flashing lights like something out of a low-budget action movie. My friends were dancing, oblivious to the law enforcement presence, while Karen raged from the driveway. "Sir," the mustached officer yelled, "we need to take names, IDs, possibly issue citations." I froze. Citations? For a garage party. Karen's eyes gleamed. Exactly. Law must be upheld, order must be preserved, and HOA rules enforced. At that moment, the doorbell rang again. We all froze. Who could it be? Another officer? The HOA board? Always more neighbors curious enough to join the circus? I opened the door cautiously. It was Mr. Lopez from 2 streets over, holding a tray of brownies. "I heard the party. Thought you could use reinforcements," he said cheerfully. I blinked. "Reinforcements? For the police?" "No," he said, setting the tray down. "For morale. Everyone needs brownies." Karen's jaw literally dropped. "I cannot believe this." Meanwhile, the precinct captain arrived in a cruiser that seemed far too large for a garage party dispute. He stepped out, looking equal parts confused and exasperated. "What in the world?" he muttered, scanning the scene. Officers were pointing, neighbors were laughing, fog was swirling, cupcakes were on hoods, and Max was still barking. One officer whispered, "Captain, it's just a party." The captain's face twisted into an expression that combined disbelief and reluctant amusement. "Well," he said slowly, "I guess technically everyone's behaving, just in a very chaotic way." Karen sputtered, red-faced. "I will not stand for this. This is anarchy. This is—" At that point, Tim cranked up the music, and Megan started a synchronized dance with the cupcakes. Max jumped on the hood of a squad car, and the fog machine, well, let's just say visibility was now officially 0. The captain held up his hands. Okay, let's Take a breath. Everyone, calm down. Maybe we can discuss this without, mass deployment of squad cars next time. Karen looked like someone had just told her the sky was green. Discuss? Discuss. How dare you? I just sighed, realizing something critical. My garage party had officially become a neighborhood legend. And no matter how this ended, there would never, ever be a simple Friday night barbecue in this neighborhood again. And yet, somewhere in the chaos, between the cupcakes, the fog, Max's barking, and Karen's righteous fury, I had to admit, it was also the most fun I'd ever had. By now, my garage had transformed into a surreal battlefield, though instead of tanks and smoke grenades, we had fog machines, karaoke microphones, and an uncomfortably large number of officers who clearly wished they had never received this call. The air was thick, not just with the artificial fog, but with tension, disbelief, and the faint smell of slightly charred burgers. I ducked behind the grill as Max, still on high alert, barked furiously at an officer who had dared to step too close. My friends were scattered around, some dancing, some laughing hysterically, and some, like Tim, trying desperately to keep his karaoke machine from toppling over into the fog. Somewhere in the haze, I could hear Karen's voice, rising above the chaos, accusing the universe itself of conspiring against her HOA ideals. Then it happened. Megan, in her infinite wisdom, decided it was a perfect moment to start the Cupcake Catapult Challenge, a game she apparently invented on the spot. Using a broomstick and a mixing bowl, she began launching cupcakes toward the fog, the squad cars, and, inevitably, the officers. One officer ducked, barely avoiding a flying chocolate swirl, while another slipped on a frosting smear, arms flailing like a drunk penguin. Cupcakes are not weapons. Karen screamed, her face red enough to fry an egg on. Technically, they can be. Tim shouted, launching another cupcake with precision only a person who has played too many video games could achieve. I groaned. Megan, what are you doing? Entertainment, she declared, as if that explained everything. Meanwhile, the fog machine had gone rogue. Tim had accidentally turned the dial to maximum output, and what was once a light mist had become an impenetrable white cloud. Officers were bumping into each other. My friends were laughing so hard they could barely keep their balance. Max, oblivious to the fog, charged through like a furry missile. And Karen was standing stoically in the driveway, waving her HOA binder like a white flag she refused to acknowledge. The precinct captain, finally stepping into the garage, blinked twice and muttered, What is this? One of the older officers coughed violently. So, it's like some kind of foggy cupcake war zone. I wanted to hide, but it was too late. Megan had spotted the captain and, in a strategic move that would later be considered questionable at best, launched a triple-stack cupcake directly at his chest. He caught it midair, blinking in stunned silence. Then, as if realizing the absurdity, he actually, without thinking, took a bite. Karen nearly had a heart attack. This is treason, she shrieked. From somewhere in the fog, Jeff appeared with brownies. We should, form alliances, he whispered. He passed a brownie to Tim, who promptly lobbed it like a grenade. The officers ducked again. Everyone, calm down, the mustache officer tried, though his voice was swallowed by the thick fog. Then came the smoke alarm. Somehow, in the middle of this cupcake and brownie melee, the smoke from the grill combined with a fog machine had tripped my kitchen smoke detector. A piercing alarm filled the garage, adding a musical accompaniment to the chaos. Max barked even louder, the fog machine churned harder, and my friend started screaming with laughter. Karen screamed in fury. I will not endure this. And then, the most surreal thing happened. One of the squad cars, which had been parked precariously close to the driveway, hit a slick frosting spot. Tires spun. The car slid, not dangerously, but dramatically, toward the garage. Officers scrambled, shouting orders no one could hear over the fog, alarms, and the ongoing cupcake assault. The car stopped just short of hitting the garage door, a mere 2 inches from disaster. At that moment, I realized something. My little garage party had evolved into something legendary. Not just a funny story, but a full-fledged suburban apocalypse, complete with frosting, fog, a barking dog, and an HOA villain who had clearly underestimated my party planning skills. Desperate to regain control, I shouted, "Everyone freeze!" Did it work? Absolutely not. Megan, emboldened, decided that now was the perfect time to introduce the Glitter Bomb finale, a craft project she swore would change everything. She shook a glitter-filled pinata and released a cloud of sparkling chaos into the garage. The fog mixed with glitter, creating a surreal, shimmering nightmare. Officers squinted through it, muttering things like, "I joined the force for burglary, not this." Karen, blinded by glitter, flailed her arms. "This is unacceptable." Tim somehow started a conga line with Max following. I couldn't stop laughing. It was absurd. The entire precinct, my neighbors, my friends, my dog, everything was caught in this glittery, foggy, frosting-filled vortex. Then came the unthinkable. Mrs. Beckman, still recording everything on her phone, tripped over a frosting smay, flinging her smartphone into the air. It landed squarely on the hood of the nearest squad car, bouncing once, twice, and finally stopping in a small puddle of spilled soda. She jumped up, shocked but unharmed, yelling, "The HOA will see this." By this point, I wasn't even trying to control the party. I had surrendered to the chaos. Burgers flipped themselves, cupcakes flew through the air, brownies acted as improvised ammunition, Max was a de facto commander of operations, and Karen had retreated to the sidewalk, muttering something about subpoenas and public humiliation. One officer, completely over it, turned to the captain. "Sir, I don't think we can contain this." The captain sighed deeply. "I think maybe we should call it a night." I blinked. "Call it a night? They came here because Karen called the cops. And now you're just leaving." He shrugged. "Sometimes you have to let the universe run its course." Karen, predictably, did not approve. She stomped toward the nearest officer, waving her binder. "I demand citations. I demand arrests. I demand." But her words were drowned out by the final crescendo. Max, in an inspired moment, leapt onto the karaoke machine, sending it crashing into fog, which tripped the smoke detector again. Sparks flew. The entire garage lit up with a dramatic symphony of alarms, flashing lights, and chaos. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized this would never be just a funny story to tell friends. This was going to be a legend. By the time the fog cleared slightly, cupcakes were flattened, brownies were smeared across walls, Max was triumphant, and Karen was glaring daggers from the curb. I knew the fallout was inevitable. But for now, we had survived the most absurd garage party of all time. The garage smelled like a dessert apocalypse. Frosting coated the floor in sticky rivers, cupcakes were flattened in tragic pyramids, and the fog machine, still somehow going, hung over us like a ghostly cloud of judgment. Max, apparently crowned Lord of Chaos, prowled the area like a tiny, furry general surveying his battlefield. I glanced at Karen. She was standing at the curb, binder in hand, hair slightly glittered from Megan's glitter bomb attack, and face flushed enough to indicate both rage and embarrassment. The woman looked like she had seen the gates of hell, and it had a soundtrack of funk music and dog barks. "They cannot get away with this," she screeched. Her words cut through the fog as officers continued trying to regain order. The mustache officer said, leaning wearily on a patrol car, "We're trying. But, it's complicated." Complicated was an understatement. Officers were dodging cupcake shrapnel, carefully navigating frosting puddles, and attempting to corral a very determined Maximum. Tim was dancing in the fog, singing karaoke at full volume, and Megan had started a synchronized frosting smear performance with Jeff that looked suspiciously like interpretive chaos art. Karen stomped toward the driveway, binder raised like a sword. "This is a war on civilization. You will be fined, arrested, citations will be issued." One of the older officers, now visibly questioning life choices, whispered to his partner, Do we even cite for frosting abuse?" Meanwhile, Mrs. Beckman had rallied some of the neighbors, who now arrived with phones in hand, live streaming the madness to the HOA Facebook page. "They need to see this," she declared, snapping pictures of officers slipping in cupcake puddles. I groaned. Oh no, this is going viral. Karen is about to go nuclear. And go nuclear she did. Karen marched straight up to the captain, shaking her binder violently. This is an outrage. I demand the full weight of the law. Citations, arrests, a full HOA tribunal. The captain raised his hand slowly, trying to mediate. Honestly, I think the best course of action is. You think? Karen shrieked. I know. You will uphold the law. You will punish these hooligans. You will. Her tirade was interrupted by a sudden loud crash from the garage. Tim, mid-karaoke, had accidentally kicked over the fog machine, sending it tumbling into a stack of folding chairs. The resulting clatter echoed like a drumline in the Chaos Symphony. Max, seeing the opportunity for maximum impact, leapt onto the fallen chairs, knocking over the karaoke machine, which hit the grill. The grill tipped slightly, and burgers slid into a puddle of frosting. Smoke billowed, alarms blared, and the fog mingled with a lingering glitter to create a surreal, almost cinematic disaster scene. One of the younger officers muttered, "Sir, I think we're officially outnumbered by pastries." The captain, pinching the bridge of his nose, muttered back, "At this point, I think that's accurate." Karen's face was beet red. I will not stand for this mockery of justice. These fiends have turned my neighborhood into a circus. Tim, ever the entertainer, saw his chance. Hey, who wants a conga line? Everyone grab a cupcake. Before anyone could respond, Megan grabbed a handful of frosting and squeezed it like a weapon, launching a perfect arc toward Karen's pristine white blazer. There was a collective gasp. Frosting hit Karen square in the chest, smearing across her blazer like a Jackson Pollock painting. She froze. The entire street froze. Then she screamed. "Enough!" she bellowed, throwing a binder onto the hood of a squad car. The binder slid off, landing in a puddle of frosting, and somehow stayed upright like a monument to HOA fury. This is war," one officer muttered. "So, is she declaring war on us?" "I think she's declaring war on physics," replied the captain, completely deadpan. Meanwhile, my friends were in full chaos mode. Jeff had grabbed brownies and started tossing them in a display he called Brownie Artillery. Max barked, chased brownies, and launched himself into the fog. The karaoke machine had somehow started playing music again despite the earlier crash, adding a looping soundtrack to the disaster. From the curb, Karen started scribbling furiously in her binder. I couldn't see what she was writing, but it was clear she was plotting something monumental, terrifying, and likely overcomplicated. Mrs. Beckman, filming the whole thing, turned to a neighbor. This is history. We'll all remember this." "Oh, we will," the neighbor replied, "especially Karen." By now, other neighbors had started showing up. Some were holding lawn chairs to watch. Others brought snacks, apparently inspired by Jeff's brownie initiative. Children waved from sidewalks. One elderly neighbor even brought binoculars, muttering, "I've never seen anything like this." The precinct captain finally clapped his hands, trying to assert authority. "All right, everyone, I need calm. This has gone off the rails." That was the point at which Max jumped on the captain's foot. The captain yelped, stumbled into a pile of frosting, and landed in a half-crouch, arms flailing. The fog swirled around him, glitter stuck to his uniform, and one of Megan's cupcakes rolled onto his shoulder. Karen gasped. "The law," she screamed. I leaned over to Tim. "I think we've officially won." "Won?" Tim laughed. "Dude, we've basically taken over the precinct. Look at them." And indeed, the officers were scattered, some trying to avoid falling in frosting, others helping each other up, and most of them just staring at the madness, silently questioning career choices. The captain, now covered in frosting and glitter, slowly stood up and muttered, "Maybe this neighborhood isn't ready for policing." Karen, however, was undeterred. She started running door to door, shouting about emergency HOA meetings, citations, and fines. The neighbors waved at her sarcastically, some even tossing cupcakes in her general direction as she disappeared into the mist. Tim grabbed the MIC ladies and gentlemen, may I present the most legendary garage party in suburban history. The fog machine hissed in agreement. Max barked like a general announcing victory. Megan threw one last glitter bomb into the air, and for a moment, the street glimmered in a surreal, chaotic rainbow. I leaned against the garage wall, finally catching my breath. The officers were still there, mostly, but their energy had clearly been sapped by frosting, fog, and sheer disbelief. Karen was plotting her next move. Neighbors were filming. Friends were laughing hysterically. And me? I realized something profound. This was no longer just a party. This was an epic legend in the making. Somewhere in the distance, the mustache officer muttered, "So, can we maybe just call it a night?" I nodded. Absolutely. And in that perfect, chaotic moment, with frosting on my hands, glitter in my hair, Max victorious at my side, and HOA Karen glaring from the sidewalk like a defeated general regrouping, I knew one thing. Nothing in this neighborhood would ever be the same. By the time Section 5 of my Friday night garage saga began, the scene resembled a post-apocalyptic festival curated by a sugar-crazed toddler. Fog swirled like confused spirits, glitter sparkled in every conceivable corner, and frosting clung to the walls, cars, and unfortunate officers like some sticky suburban moss. Max, undefeated, pranced triumphantly across the battlefield, occasionally barking at anyone foolish enough to get too close. Karen had retreated to her front porch, a fortress of indignation. Her blazer, once pristine, now looked like it had survived a food fight at a middle school cafeteria. Her HOA binder was battered but held high, her last symbol of authority in a world that had clearly rejected her. Meanwhile, the precinct captain, frosting dripping from his hat and glitter stuck to his shoulder, called what could only be described as a full tactical intervention meeting in the middle of the street. Several officers, slipping on cupcake puddles, huddled around him, taking notes and shaking their heads. "Listen up," the captain said, trying to project authority over the soundtrack of Tim belting out karaoke classics and Megan twirling in a glitter tornado. "We need a coordinated approach to restore, suburban order." One officer raised a hand. "So, do we even have authority to intervene in a cupcake war?" The captain blinked. "Not technically, but at this point, I don't care. Containment is key." The plan, as it turned out, was simple in theory but impossible in practice. Divide and conquer. 2 officers would secure the garage perimeter, 2 would attempt to calm the neighbors, and the rest would, well, survive. As the first officer stepped forward, Tim noticed them. "Oh no, it's officer intervention time," he shouted gleefully, grabbing a frosting-covered spatula like a weapon of mass chaos. The confrontation began. One officer approached the garage entrance. "So, step away from the..." Before he could finish, Max leapt between them, barking furiously. The officer tripped on a glitter patch and ended up sliding across a puddle of frosting, landing spectacularly in the middle of a cupcake pile. Everyone stopped. I yelled, but no one was listening. Not Karen. Not Maximum, not Megan, not Tim, and certainly not the fog machine, which now hissed like a disgruntled dragon. Karen, seeing the officer sprawled in frosting, had what could only be described as an existential meltdown. "This is unlawful," she screamed, stamping her foot so hard that a small glitter explosion erupted from her shoes. "The law, the HOA, the very concept of decency, has been destroyed." Meanwhile, the other officers tried to advance, but each step became a comedy of errors. One officer, attempting to grab Max, slipped on a brownie, somersaulted like an amateur gymnast, and landed in a puddle of frosting, sending cupcakes flying in every direction. Another officer, trying to help, slipped on the frosting puddle, accidentally kicking a glitter bomb into the fog, creating a shimmering explosion that blinded half the street. Tim, noticing a tactical opportunity, began orchestrating defensive maneuvers. He spun around, waving his spatula and shouting, "Hold the line! Protect the frosting!" My friends followed suit, flinging brownies and cupcakes like grenades while I tried desperately to maintain some semblance of order. It was at this moment that Mrs. Beckman, ever the documentarian, decided to escalate. She climbed onto a nearby car for better video angles, shouting, "This will be on Facebook. This will go viral. Everyone will see Karen's tyranny." Karen's eyes widened. Tyranny. No. Her words were drowned out by a perfect storm of chaos. Max barking, cupcakes flying, glitter exploding, brownies hurtling like missiles, and the fog machine groaning under its own mechanical despair. One officer, pinned behind a patrol car, muttered, "So, it's like trying to enforce the law in Narnia." The captain, seeing the disaster unfold, finally made the executive decision. Retreat, regroup, and maybe just survive. He backed toward the precinct vehicles, slipping on a frosting puddle but somehow staying upright. At that moment, Megan unveiled her secret weapon, the glitter confetti cannon. With a dramatic flourish, she fired a massive cloud of glitter directly at Karen's fortress porch. The glitter clung to Karen's hair, face, and binder, sticking in every crevice like a sparkling prison. Karen froze, glitter falling from her eyelashes like confetti at a parade. The neighbors, witnessing this, erupted in cheers. "Take that, Karen," one shouted. "Long live frosting," another yelled. Children danced in puddles of cupcake mush. Even the elderly neighbor with binoculars nodded in solemn approval. Karen's indignation reached critical mass. This is an outrage," she screamed, hopping down from the porch, but her every step was hampered by frosting, glitter, and the general chaos. She attempted to storm toward the garage, but slipped on a brownie, crashing spectacularly into a pile of cupcakes. Her binder toppled into the frosting puddle, pages fluttering in the fog like tiny paper flags of defeat. Max barked triumphantly, circling Karen's fallen form as if declaring victory. Tim jumped onto a folding chair, raising a spatula in the air. "We have achieved ultimate frosting dominance." I laughed, collapsing against the wall, exhausted but exhilarated. The precinct, realizing their intervention was futile, began to quietly retreat, officers slipping on frosting and glitter as they went. The captain stopped at the edge of the street, pinching the bridge of his nose. I give up. Containment, impossible. Retreat, now." Karen, humiliated, attempted to rally her dignity. "This will not stand. There will be consequences," she shouted, slipping again in the frosting. A child tossed a cupcake at her for emphasis. She glared, but the sparkle of glitter on her hair made her look more ridiculous and terrifying. The fog began to lift slightly, revealing the full scale of the disaster. The garage, now a mix of frosting, glitter, brownies, and overturned chairs, resembled a war zone from a surreal candy-themed movie. Max sat proudly in the center, frosting on his nose like war paint. My friends were cheering. Some collapsed laughing on the ground, and the neighbors clapped from the sidewalks. Somewhere in the chaos, I realized something profound. We had survived, and somehow we had won. Karen, in a glittered and frosting-covered defeat, would forever be remembered as the HOA villain who underestimated a garage party. The officers, though alive, would recount this story in hushed tone for years, shaking their heads in disbelief. And the party had achieved legendary status. I looked at the carnage and smiled. "Well," I said, raising a frosting-covered spatula in salute, "that was one for the books." Tim high-fived Maxim and Megan twirled in a glitter swirl. Jeff handed out brownies like medals of honor. And Karen, well, Karen sat on the curb, muttering about subpoenas, citations, and how she'd win next time, oblivious of the fact that she had already lost in every possible way. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the chaos, I realized something magical had happened. What started as a simple garage party had become a suburban legend, a story that neighbors would whisper about for decades, and a night none of us would ever forget. The precinct eventually drove away, frosting and glitter clinging to their uniforms, muttering about never again and next time, donuts only. Karen remained, defeated but still plotting. And Max sat proudly, surveying his kingdom, barking occasionally to assert dominance over the cupcakes. And in that perfect, chaotic moment, I knew it. The garage party had not just survived HOA Karen, it had triumphed. And nothing in the neighborhood would ever be the same again. The morning after the great garage party apocalypse was surreal. The sun rose over a neighborhood that looked like a dessert-themed war zone. Frosting crusted the driveway in sticky rivers. Glitter sparkled in places that should never, ever see glitter, and the faint aroma of slightly burnt burgers lingered like a stubborn ghost. Max, still undefeated, lounged in the center of the carnage, his chest puffed out with a self-satisfaction only a dog who had conquered an entire HOA could achieve. Tim sat cross-legged on a folding chair, his karaoke machine miraculously still playing a muffled version of Uptown Funk. Megan was sweeping glitter into small piles, whispering something about preserving the legend. Jeff handed out brownies like trophies, while I surveyed the battlefield and wondered if anyone would ever believe this story. Karen, however, was not deterred. She had retreated to her front porch the night before, muttering something about subpoenas, citations, and legal repercussions for frosting assault. Now, in the harsh morning light, she looked like a defeated general surveying a conquered kingdom. Her blazer glittered, her binder slightly soggy, and her hair looked like it had been attacked by a unicorn. I will have justice, she declared, glaring at the frosting streak driveway. The HOA board will hear of this. Citations will be issued. Neighborhood order will be restored. Some neighbors peeked over fences, whispering and laughing quietly. Mrs. Beckman, clearly still euphoric from live-streaming the chaos, waved from across the street. "You're famous now, Karen," she said cheerfully. Everyone saw what happened. Karen gasped. "Famous? For this?" She gestured wildly at the frosting, glitter, and brownies strewn across the yard. No, this cannot be allowed." Meanwhile, the precinct had officially declared the scene unmanageable. Officers had left behind a sticky residue of frosting on their uniforms as a warning to future generations. Never underestimate a suburban garage party. Rumor had it that Captain Reynolds personally requested the cleaning staff bring industrial-strength degreaser, but no one in the precinct wanted to recount the story publicly. As for the HOA, well, the HOA board quickly convened an emergency meeting, which Karen attended, glitter still clinging to her lapels. She passionately recounted the chaos, the lawlessness, and the moral decay of our neighborhood. She presented her evidence, Mrs. Beckman's videos, photos, and some questionable diagrams of frosting trajectories. The board, however, seemed distracted. Apparently, the videos had gone viral overnight. Comments poured in from neighbors across the state, marveling at the sheer audacity of a garage party that had bested both HOA law and law enforcement. Memes were created. GIFs of Max's triumphant bark circulated widely. One particularly popular post captioned, "When Karen calls the cops but the dog wins." Karen, furious, slammed a binder on the table. "This is an outrage. I demand immediate action." One of the board members, trying to remain professional, cleared their throat. Given the viral nature of this, maybe we should reconsider the approach. The public likes, them. They're charming." Karen's eyes bulged. "Charming? This is a crime against civility." The board collectively shrugged. HOA rules, it turned out, could not withstand combined force of cupcakes, glitter, and Max's dogged determination. Karen left the meeting muttering darkly about revenge, fines, and legal loopholes, but her power had been irrevocably undermined. The neighborhood had spoken, and the verdict was unanimous. The party had won. Back at my garage, the aftermath was chaotic in its own right. Friends were helping clean up, but there was laughter in every corner. Tim, inspired, had written a garage apocalypse anthem on the karaoke machine, which he performed intermittently between cupcake tosses. Megan meticulously documented glitter and frosting patterns of posterity, claiming it was scientific evidence of our victory. Max occasionally barked in approval, inspecting the remnants of brownies and frosting like a proud general surveying his troops. The street itself became a spectacle. Other neighbors came by to witness the aftermath, take photos, and quietly place bets on whether Karen would try another intervention. Some brought coffee. Others brought their own desserts, claiming they had to contribute to history. Even the kids were gleeful, splashing in frosting puddles, declaring it the best night ever. As for Karen, she became a mix of legend and cautionary tale. Rumors spread about her attempt to sue the neighborhood, her failed HOA interventions, and the viral nature of the garage apocalypse. Children whispered about her as if she was some villain from a superhero comic. Beware the glitter binder. But life in the neighborhood went on. Slowly, order returned, albeit a slightly stickier, sparkly version of order. My garage became known as a place where the impossible had happened. Invitations to future subtle parties were met with hushed anticipation. And Max became a local celebrity. One neighbor even started a Max Hero of the Garage Instagram account. A week later, Karen tried to reassert her power by organizing a neighborhood meeting. Naturally, she brought her binder. Naturally, it had glitter on it. Naturally, Max attended, barking ferociously at the front door. The meeting ended quickly, with Karen tripping over a cupcake someone had left strategically by the entrance. She left, muttering threats about legal action. No one followed her. No one cared. The HOA had learned its lesson. Never underestimate a backyard barbecue gone rogue. As for me, I looked at my friends, at Max, at the sparkling, frosting-covered garage, and I realized something profound. We hadn't just thrown a party. We had created a legend, one that would live on in HOA lore, in viral videos, and in whispered stories whenever someone in the neighborhood wanted to remember that one Friday night when law, order, and decorum had been utterly defeated by cupcakes, glitter, fog machines, and sheer audacity. The sun set over our street, glinting off frosting puddles and stray glitter. Laughter echoed faintly from the garage. Max barked once, a sound that seemed like approval. And in that perfect, absurd, glorious moment, I knew the story was complete. We had survived HOA Karen. We had survived the precinct. And we had survived ourselves. The garage stood as a monument to rebellion, friendship, and chaos. And the legend of that night? Well, it would live forever.